these teams going to be sort of supplanted as the top teams in Korea? A lot of mystery going into this season.
Yeah, exactly. And especially, we keep reiterating this, but around this Najin team that really didn't play that much together as a five-man unit, these particular players, Duke, Watch, Goong, OQ, and Kane during the preseason, even though there was strong indications that this is what their starting roster was going to end up being. And it's interesting, too, because this Najin team is a Sword Shield hybrid, and now, usually, Najin, we think about them as being a very solo lane focused team, but now Goong has a very big playmaking AD carry on his side with OQ, and Duke, of course, playing a lot of tanks throughout the preseason, especially those last two Scion picks. And they have a lot of more versatility now than they did before, because Duke can play these carry top laners, but he's also so good on some more of these utility tanks as well. So I feel like by combining the Sword and Shield rosters, they've really opened up a new dimension of strategy that didn't exist for either Sword or Shield previously.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of these combined rosters that we're seeing really have become hybrids of both teams' distinctive styles. Like Shield, very long games, very, defensive sort of team fighting oriented play. Sword, very aggressive, the old do-dive mentality, right? Going all the way back to Mach Noon, heading up that team. And now we have this hybrid, this team that is much more team focused, but yet still has that explosiveness to, I suppose you could say.
That's right. And of course, Goong being a more aggressive mid laner has always had more passive AD carries like Zephyr, whereas Sword was having Prey, they were having OQ, these kind of big-time playmaking ADs. And so we'll have to see how this synergy works, but this is the guy to watch right here. You can see 8.3 KDA so far in the preseason. Very explosive player, especially on these big hyper carries like Tristana.
Yeah, and Kane, a player that he's always been one of my favorite players in Korea. He's always been one of the most cerebral, intelligent supports out there, and he has the ability to make these big plays on champions like Thresh. Wouldn't be surprised to see that banned away from him quite a bit. I mean, this guy he's the brains right now behind Najin. So can they translate that into a win against a team like SKT? It's kind of a big job for him right out of the gate.
Yeah, very, very big job, of course, for Najin to take down SK Telecom, which did seem to be the premier team here in Korea over the course of the preseason.
And now on the other side of the arena is a team that needs almost no introduction at all. SK Telecom T1, an organization that won Season 3 Worlds, and they still do have Bengi and Faker. So two of that Worlds team roster is still on this, but we have seen a lot of changes come after that.
And of course, this is talking about the transition and carry potential on Najin. When we look at this SK Telecom roster, we see, of course, Faker, being the main carry, but he was very reliant on Piglet as a secondary carry on the team. And now that role is kind of transferred into the top lane on Marin, whereas Bang and Wolf are good, and they're very consistent, but they are rather conservative, especially compared to Piglet's split-pushing Vayne style and his kind of big auto-attack champions. Bang, he's much more comfortable putting down some damage from the periphery and cleaning up fights. He's the janitor right now of SK Telecom. And Marin and Faker, they're the ones you're going to see initiating. They're the ones who are going to be very much targeted. They have more aggressive laning phases.
Yeah, I really think this roster is pretty much perfect in terms of how these players are playing. I mean, you've got that bot lane, right, that's so stable, so safe, and then you've got Marin and Faker, the big playmakers. Bengi can concentrate on helping them out. It really is kind of a perfect combination of styles for these individual players.
Well, it's really interesting, too, because Najin White Shield was a very solo lane-focused team and is now switched to incorporating a bigger carry in OQ. And SK Telecom's kind of operating in the reverse. They were mid-AD, and now they're switching more towards mid-top with a more supportive style AD carry. So Bang is a lot more like Zephyr in that way. So we'll have to see, because both of these teams are kind of like switched positions in terms of where their strength and their punch is coming from.
It is true, and it's interesting that SK Telecom doesn't seem to have really missed a beat in terms of making this large transition, too. They looked great in the preseason.
Fantastic.
Clearly, easily the best team we saw in the preseason, I would say by far. And a lot of people include Najin up there as a top team, and they certainly are, but I would say there's another decent step between them and SKT. We'll see after the games today, but it's really incredible to see just how good these guys look so fast.
That's right. Of course, Bang hanging up right there with OQ at the top of the KDAs. Impressive player, but it is easier to be an AD carry on a team with Faker on it, because he absorbs so many cooldowns during team fights, and everybody's so desperate to kill him that it does make your job a little bit easier. And Wolf, of course, pulling out the Blitzcrank. This guy's been great at creating opportunities. Fantastic initiator for a support player.
Yeah, and I mean, he really does have a good brain about him, too, in terms of staying safe in the laning phase and really knowing when to turn on the aggression and when to sort of turn it off as well. Which is something that I don't recommend, ever turn off the aggression. But, you know, it works for him, and I respect that. Now, Goong on your screen right now, a player that I would say, you know, maybe underperformed a little bit in the preseason. I think we're going to be looking for, I know Najin is going to be looking for a little bit more from him in these games, but it is time, guys. No more waiting. I think we're right about ready to get into picks and bans for game number 1, SKT versus Najin. Let's take a look at a few more points, though, before we do that. The win rate for Najin right now, 53.50.
This is champions only, and it's including, this is Najin's shield, and also before the shield sword split. So this dates all the way back to the formation of Najin, and Track Shield is the main team, and this is going to be SK Telecom T1K's win rate right here of 65.8%. An astounding win rate to have in champions.
It's an astounding win rate for any esport, man. I mean, if you're up in the 60s, you are one of the best. Absolutely. That's a really hard thing to do consistently. Numbers of Barons and Dragons fairly similar there, but you can see, of course, going more towards that SKT side.
Yeah, and this is for the preseason only, by the way. So you can see a little bit later, first Dragon timing right there from SK Telecom.
Key players. For mid, of course, Goong is going to be one of them for Najin e-mFire. I mean, this guy was just a monster back in the day on Ari, on Nidalee. Things have changed a lot. His pool was changed a lot, but still performing pretty well. And wow. 100%, of course.
Naturally.
Why wouldn't it be?
And, of course, Faker as well has played some phenomenal Lysandra games in the preseason. And easyhoon played very well as well, having some great use of Karthus, which was a bit of a surprise to see. But you can see the difference there. More long-range champions coming in for easyhoon versus more engage-heavy champions, or even playing a secondary AD carry. So we just have some stats here based on champions. The first one is Zed versus Lysandra. Second one
is Vladimir versus Orianna, actually. And then finally, Orianna versus Gragas down at the bottom, just checking out some of those individual champion versus champion stats. As far as Goong versus easyhoon, we've got Caitlyn, Kassadin
versus Jace.
I'm reading Korean, guys. Kassadin
Zed versus Rise,
Jace.
and Rise versus Orianna, finally.
That's right. I didn't know I'd have to read Korean and do an English cast at the same time. They surprised us with this one. But yeah, as you can see, the stats, of course, generally leaning a little bit more in favor of the SK Telecom players.